Hello and welcome to Agree to Disagree, the series where I take some opinions from around the Fire Emblem community, I pose them to my guest, and we discuss whether or not we agree with them and why. Before we start, I would like to thank the people who back the channel on Patreon and support me in making content like this and everything else on the channel. For more information on the benefits for backing from just £1 a month, check the link in the description. If you would like to see more content like this, consider subscribing to the channel, and if you wouldn't mind rating the video, it helps it to reach more people. If you have a take you would like to see appear in this series, you can either drop it in the comments or there is a channel for it in the Discord server, which is linked in the description. If you're a content creator who is interested in appearing on the series, feel free to get in touch via either Twitter or Discord. This video was recorded a few months ago prior to my hiatus, so it is possible the opinions of both myself and my guest have changed somewhat between now and then, particularly when relating to Fire Emblem Engage, as it has now been out for much longer than it was at the time of recording. Lastly, the day after this video is released, my guest is doing a charity stream in accordance with Pride Month, going through a full playthrough of Fire Emblem Path of Radiance in a single stream, with various sabotages able to be triggered by donations, such as immediately ending the turn, force deploying a unit, discarding an item, etc. Please consider checking this out. You'll be able to find all of the relevant information on their channel, and I've linked the specific announcement video in the description. And today I'm joined by Dani Doyle.
Hi, I am Dani Doyle. I do a variety of challenge runs, primarily like 0% growth things, but I'm trying to branch out into other challenge runs, and I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about well, I don't know what we're talking about other than Fire Emblem, the vague topic, but I'm excited. A link to my channel will be in the description.
It will. So yeah, if you want to check out Dani's channel, it will be down there, and we've got a few takes to go over today, a few opinions from around the community, and we're going to start off with one that I think has been spoke about quite a lot with the past couple of releases. The support system needs a big major-ass overhaul.
Interesting.
So, quite vague in a sense, but the support system's obviously gone through a few iterations over time. You've had sort of the more GBA era thing where you had to position units next to each other, and gaining supports was quite difficult. There were also on-map supports where you had to like speak to each other whilst in combat. We had the Path of Radiance one where supports were a lot more limited in how many you could do, but they were a bit easier to get. And then we've had the more recent iterations where they just a constant, you get them all the time, very frequently. So, do you wanna kick us off on this one?
Yeah. So I guess it depends on what would qualify as a big major ass overhaul. Because I would argue that Engage, at least prior to you being able to build supports in the Somniel, and I would say even afterwards, kind of did overhaul the support system from Awakening through three houses, because you build them a lot slower, like only getting them on player phase, and even if you build them in the Somniel, you just pick 3 pairings per battle, and they feel, I wouldn't say less impactful, but harder to, when you have to be adjacent in order to get bonuses, and the bonuses are not as big as they were in like GBA and even 3DS Emblem era. They feel almost like they don't exist to me, unless you're like really planning very, very specific pairings. I don't know, I mostly just go for the supports to get the support conversations in Engage, as opposed to like in 3 houses getting the chain attacks, or not chain attacks.
The ones in 3 houses, link attacks, yeah.
Link attacks, thank you.
They were very impactful, I would say, from a gameplay perspective, especially around that mid-game, like pre-hit plus 20. I'd say they held quite a bit of actual like on-map impact, but there were, I think, is 3 houses the only game where supports are player phase only?
Well, Engages as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Or do you mean the bonuses for them?
The bonuses for the supports, yeah.
I think it is. I know that, GBA and Tellius, you just get specific passive bonuses. And then in Fates and Awakening, it's mostly impacts the pair-up. I don't know if it actually affects you outside of pair-up. It probably does. I'm not super familiar, but I think the big thing is you get better pair-up bonuses, and you get, in Awakening, a higher odd of dual guard and dual attack.
Okay. I'm not super familiar with the 3DS games, so I can't speak too much to them. But I guess there's sort of two aspects for this, right? There's the gameplay aspects, and then there's the actual supports themselves, and the unlocking of them, and sort of the frequency of them, and things like that.
Yeah, and the story, I mean, everyone talks about in Three Houses, you know, getting a ton of C supports makes it feel like characters are regressing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that aspect could use an overhaul. I know it's kind of old hat to be like, Bernadetta C supports are really annoying,
Yeah.
but Bernadetta C supports are really annoying, and if you've gotten some of that, you know, hidden gems or whatever in the B and A, and then go back to C where everyone's just saying their gimmick.
I think
would
some
appreciate not
characters
having that.
do. Some characters do really suffer from things like that. I think like Lauren's is a really easy one to point at as well. Marianne potentially as well.
Ferdinand's.
Yeah, there's quite a few characters who sort of will undergo development in one support and then just go back to normal. Even as far as like just going C to B and then back to a C, it can feel really like reboundy in a way. Like it's just quite odd, which we didn't really get in the past games because supports were much more limited. Especially I'm thinking like Tellius, where you only got 5 supports per character. It was much more limited. You didn't really get that back and forth as much.
And in Tellius especially, because it relies just on deployment and not on being near each other, they tend to grow at the same rates. So like Jill is more racist in her C supports than in B and A, but you usually get her C supports around the same time as each other.
Yes.
So you don't get like, I've got A support with Left and she's finally realized like I was indoctrinated, etc. And then I go back to Mist and I'm racist again.
Yes. No, there's definitely a truth to that. I think one of my bigger issues with, again, I can't speak too much to the 3DS games, but Three Houses and Engage is sometimes you'll get back to wherever your hub world is in the relative game, and you'll just have like 10, 12, 15 supports to sit through, and it can just get really, really tedious. Like, it's just too much at once almost sometimes, I feel like. Like, supports are nice, but I don't want this huge barrage of them that it feels like we sometimes get, especially early Three Houses, or just after the time skip, when you get everyone's C supports and then everyone's A supports. You can be sat there for like half an hour, 45 minutes just watching supports, and it can really start to drag, I think.
What they really need to do is add an autoplay the next support feature so you can use it as an opportunity to go to the bathroom while you're streaming.
True.
That's the overhaul you need.
True. At least we've got auto chat now, that helps, but yeah.
Oh, true. I think I land on slightly agree, because I do think it, in the story-wise and in just like the pure getting a ton of them wise, it really needs an overhaul. But I kind of like it mechanically as it is, like the bonuses that you get.
Yeah, I think they've gone through a lot of different iterations of supports, and I don't think any of them are quite right. Like, GBA was just silly, having to sit there at the end of C's maps pressing enter and just to build supports. Well, please don't take us back to that. But now it almost feels like they come without any effort. Like, that you just sort of get all these supports, like characters share one meal together and now they're supporting, or they fight each other in the arena and now they're friends. And it's a little bit odd, so I'm going to lean on slightly agree on this one as well. I think they've gone through quite a lot with the supports, but I don't think they've quite found the right system yet, which eventually, one day they might.
I would argue that Path of Radiance is the only game that got it right, or at least closest to right.
It's the closest, I would agree with that. I think, yeah. I think the limiting on supports really helps a lot, and I think GBA had limits on supports as well, but I actually don't remember because I never get that many of them because they're so out of the way. But yeah, the limited volume of them definitely helps.
Yeah, GBA and Tellius were both limit 5. Well, Radiant Dawn is terrible, but Path of Radiance is what I'm talking about when I say Tellius, where it's just like limit 5 and then it's just from being deployed together. So they kind of get it for free, but you don't get like a billion at a time for free.
Yeah. No, that's definitely fair, and I think that helps a lot. I just think my issue with the latest 2 games is just the fact that you sometimes get those huge barrage of supports, and like, especially from a streaming perspective, it can be really awkward. Especially on like a playthrough when you're trying to show the supports, and you're like, well, I don't mind showing 1 or 2, but I don't want to sit here watching supports for 45 minutes. We've got chapter 22 to get into, and it's exciting. We want to play the level. It can just be, yeah, be a bit of a drag.
Well, but
sometimes.
like then you get if it's a character you like, you want to watch it. If it's a character you write and you've never seen it before, or just you appreciate the sport, you want to watch it, but you don't want to like have people leave because now you're not streaming anymore.
Yeah, I think like part of the big issue with Engages is the arena supports, because they're not selection based. They just sort of happen. And you end up with these situations where, like, a character who you dropped on Chapter 4 ends up with a support with one of your, like, current characters, and you're like, there's somebody here who has a support, and I kind of want to watch it, but I only care about half the characters in them. And it's a bit odd.
In my first... Oh, sorry.
No, you could go on.
In my first playthrough, Zelkov got to A rank before Chapter 21 with Jean, who never left the bench.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's like... I think
that happened.
I think, like, on the one hand, it's kind of funny, and it can give you a bit of an insight to these characters you're not using, which might encourage you to use them, so it can have some upsides. But it also, like, it feels rewarding when I use a character and get a support for using them. Like, I unlock a bit of their story through use, so... I don't know. I think it could definitely be overhauled, so I definitely lean on agree on this one.
Alright, well, I agree with your agree.
Okay, we agree to agree. That's the opposite of the series name, but we'll take it. So, the next one's very engage-focused. It's a very engage-focused take. Yunaka is the best thief on Maddening because she comes when daggers and thieves are useful.
Ooh, you picked this one because you know my feelings about Yunaka, don't you?
I have feelings about Yunaka and Zelkov, and I think this one's interesting. I think it's actually a really interesting question.
I do as well. I'm chewing on it. I feel like So I want to start by saying I think Yunaka is severely overrated. Even on hard mode, but especially on Maddening, where you can't do this funny zero dodge thing. Or zero hit thing, rather. Zero dodge would be terrible.
Yes, zero dodge would be fairly awful.
Zero dodge is Ike. That's Ike's thing.
Yes.
I think that even if you are able to set up a situation where she has, like, they have 1% hit on her, she's not making any progress in the late game. And Thief is just not a great class to start out in, because you have to get to level 20 to reclass, and I don't think it's a class you want to be in the end game.
That's fair.
That said, she is super useful in the early game. Like,
she's so good.
I think she's like the second Jagan. Yeah, like, Steel Dagger +4 is just like...
I immediately after getting Yunaka on my stream playthrough, I spent some time just, like, looking through forges. I got out a Yunaka and Iron Dagger +4, and she was one-shotting everything on the Anna Paralog. And it was sort of my first time in Engage having a unit just walk up and one-round things. And, like, that was a lot of fun.
And it's not even like a waste of forge materials, because you can just give those daggers to Marin or Amber if you make him a Wolf Knight, or anyone you make a Wolf Knight.
Or even Zelkov later down the line, who is the other thief, I guess, in this conversation.
Yeah. Like, statistically, Zelkov will do better after he joins than Yunaka.
Yes.
But I don't think he earns a deployment slot, because Thief is not... I don't think Thief is a great endgame class, and it takes him 4 levels to reclass into something, or even a mid-game class. I don't, like... The Fog of War vision is nice in the Tamara map.
True.
But I don't think I don't think I can justify using him after that, unless, you know, obviously all the units in Engage are usable.
Yeah.
Like, but I think he's usually taking a slot from someone better.
See, I think he's in a really awkward spot, because I think, like, Chapter 12, that really limited deployment slot, the one where you get Fagado, Benet, and Pandreo, you only get to bring 6 of your own units alongside a leader, so you get to choose 6 units to bring. But I think Zelkov probably ends up being one of those 6 units in most scenarios, if you're just going for your strongest party at that time, along with Kagetsu and Ivy. I think all 3 of them probably end up taking a deployment slot there. And then you get one more deployment slot on the next chapter, which might be Pandreo, Fagado, or someone else who you left behind. But then you expand massively to 12 units for Chapter 14, and then you go right back down to 10 units? I think you get to choose 9 units for Chapter 15. So there's just sort of, like, all these deployment slot shuffles around that point in time. I think, like, he can struggle to see consistent deployment, but he might be in that conversation. But even if he is, I think his biggest issue is that, at least compared to Yunaka, is I think they can both contribute pretty well when they join, but Yunaka stands out much more against your current party at that time, whereas Zelkov is a good unit in an army of good units. It's like, I'm not super familiar with Radiant Dawn, but it's the argument I commonly hear against units like Mia, Ike, and Ha, like they're a good unit in an army of good units. And I think that's kind of the issue Zelkov faces at this point in time. Like, sure, he's very good at that period of time, but you've got Kagetsu, Ivy, Pandreo, Marin, Panette. Like, you've got all these great units joining at that point in time. He doesn't stand out as much.
Now, this might be because of the way I like to approach Chapter 12, but I actually have never deployed Zelkov for Chapter 12. I think, yeah, I didn't use him in my first playthrough, and then after that... So I like to try to route Chapter 12 as fast as possible to not deal with the reinforcements.
Yeah, those Wolf Knights are a huge pain, and the green units don't have brains. Yeah.
Flyers are super helpful for that. So Ivy, Chloe, if I'm using her. If not, I've probably turned one of the early game training projects into Wyvern at that point. I mean, I usually have a Lear and Griffin, so that's a third flyer, but I don't necessarily know that Zelkov really helps in routing that map more than, like, an investment target from Brodia would.
That might be fair.
Like, Citrine with Dire Thunder can just delete a couple of enemies. And yeah, she doesn't have an enemy phase, but...
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's definitely debatable.
I definitely think he's good on the Tamara map, and I definitely... I mean, he's fine on the Battle for Solm, but it kind of feels like he's just the best unit who I don't have to bench, if that makes sense. But Yunaka in the early game is very, very good, so I think I strongly agree with this. But not because I think she's a good investment target, just because, like, she's Jaken number 2.
Yeah, it's worth noting Yunaka does have a couple of advantages over Zelkov even as the game progresses. I think she's got a better personal ability, not that Zelkov's is anything awful, but Yunaka's is really nice. Standing in an avoid tile giving her 15 crit is... Yeah, it's quite handy. 15 crit is usually quite appreciated, especially for a unit who can double quite a bit. She also has a much better resistance stat, which can hold merit for mage tanking. So, Yunaka does hold a couple of benefits over Zelkov, even though in the long term I do think Zelkov will pan out to be the better unit. Yunaka does hold some small advantages there.
She can also theoretically get, like, Vantage or Canter or something. But
that's
I don't know
also
how much
true.
That helps her.
That is actually true. Access to something like, yeah, like you say, like Canter, Vantage, Momentum, any of those sort of big early abilities, even something like Advance might be helpful just to help her move a little bit more, being trapped in that low move class for so long.
Or if you're going for a Void tank, the Avoid pluses from Marth could make it so she doesn't need the Fog tiles.
Yeah. She also gets, well, she's at least guaranteed one map of Micaiah, and potentially she could get more of that, which could really accelerate her SP. Even to just let her get things like speed plus 3, speed plus 5 a little bit easier, although I don't know how relevant that is with the well nonsense. I'm
glad you mentioned the map with Micaiah, because I actually have a really spicy take about how to use Yunaka long term if you want to.
Hit me.
You don't use her at all on her join map, and then second seal her as soon as you have a second seal so that you can promote her into a promoted class with only 10 levels instead of, like, I think she needs 14.
I think there is probably merit to second sealing her early, like, out of Thief, but I would still use her prior to getting the second seal, because unless you get the well, I don't think you get a second seal until Chapter 9, and I'm definitely using her in that interim period. I just think she's too strong, but if you second seal her out, sure, you lose a bit of XP, but I'm not too bothered. I'd still use her in that period and then second seal her out, probably. But yeah, there are also merits to second sealing Yunaka early for sure. I think I'm going to lean on agree for this one. I think it's definitely debatable, and I think there are merits to Zelkov, but I could see Yunaka, I think Yunaka's peak comes at a more important time, at a time when your party is weaker and she really stands out, whereas Zelkov's peak, it might actually be better in comparison to the enemies at the time, but it's in an army of units who are very strong as it is and don't really need that additional support.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I also think the units around Zelkov benefit more from training, whereas a lot of the units who you have when Yunaka's there, you're probably going to drop anyway. So if she, like, steals experience, which I know is, not the most relevant thing, but it doesn't super matter. Like, if you're taking a level away from Alfred, it's not as bad as taking a level away from Kagetsu.
Yes, that's probably fair. So, we're both on the same side of the scale on that one, but slightly different levels of intensity, I guess, with our opinions. The next one, more of a, I guess, a thematic take. child characters should not be fieldable soldiers. So, I guess we first need to define a child character. I consider it an actual child, not like a 15, 16-year-old. Like, I would consider that a child character. Like, Anna and John are different in my head to, like, Petra and Felix.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, I'm on board with this. I don't know why we have children characters in these games. Well, not children characters, but playable children. It's strange.
Like, it stands out much more in a game like Three Houses, which is going for a more grounded, serious tone, than, like, Awakening, where it's super silly. So, the fact that... Is Gaius a kid, or does he just really like candy?
Yeah,
I don't know Awakening characters that well.
Yeah, you can look into something like, say, if we take FE9 as an example, if you look at someone like Rolf and Mist, I feel like it almost stands out a bit less that you're deploying actual children into battle. But also, I think that game has, like, we're a small mercenary company, we're, you know, on the run from a major army, like, okay, it's not ideal, but we kind of need all hands on deck here. Whereas, and also, like, the child characters in that game, like, Rolf is an archer and Mist is a healer. Like, it kind of feels like they're more supportive roles, if that makes sense, whereas in Engage, we've got Anna joining as an axe fighter and just throwing herself at people, and yeah, like, her introduction is she gets pulled out of a chest and a bunch of people beat her. Like, it's rather odd. And,
I think Path of Radiance does a good job of justifying it story-wise. Like, there's a whole cutscene where Ike is like, no, you guys go to the backline, and they're like, if you die, I'm sad, you don't get to, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like it attempts to justify it a bit more, whereas I don't really remember any resistance from the party of Anna just joining the fighting force. Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. I can't say it's one I'm overly passionate about one way or the other. I'm not overly fussed about the age of the characters that we control as units, but yeah, I'd rather our characters were just of an adult age.
I agree. It's not one where I'm gonna go, like, on my soapbox about how, you know, hashtag cancel Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
But it would probably be an improvement.
I think the main reason I want the child characters to stop being fieldable soldiers is so people stop talking about child characters being fieldable soldiers. Like, I realise the hypocrisy as I brought this topic into a video, but I think that is my main reason behind it. It just seems to get brought up a lot as one of those points of conversation in the community of things that are sketchy about Fire Emblem, and yeah, if they stopped doing it, those conversations would stop happening.
It's like, I hate Fire Emblem, and war crimes, and child soldiers.
I never want to hear about war crimes again.
Hear so much, and I'm just like, I'm over it.
Yeah. Especially after Three Houses. Yeah.
Oh my god. The number of people who don't know what a war crime is about
the word war criminal is, like, burned into my brain. It's just like, I get, like, flashbacks when I see it. We've had 3 years of it. It's fairly awful.
I am of the opinion that the Geneva Conventions did not exist in medieval times, and therefore, even if you want to pretend that Fire Emblem is a parallel to our world, like, the concept of war crimes wasn't a thing when we were using swords and axes in battle.
I'm gonna, in regard to the child characters, I'm just gonna lean on agree. Like, I'm not overly passionate one way or another, but yeah, I'd appreciate if they stopped putting child characters in the game, sure. I'd rather that than they kept them in the game, so yeah, sure, I agree with this.
Same.
Cool. Back to a more gameplay-oriented take. This one relates to Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones. Ross is underrated somewhat. Those first 9 trainee levels go so fast, and the hatchet fixes his accuracy problems. He ends up a really fast berserker that is great all the way to the end of the game.
So I don't know if you saw or heard about my most recent Sacred Stones Iron Man, but I am based in Rosspilt now, so I strongly agree with this.
Okay.
So I don't think he's like an S tier or even A or B tier unit. But he does the thing that villager characters, I think, need to do in order to justify their existence, in that he can do something that your other trainable units can't do.
Yeah.
So, like, John, for example, is what I would say is a counterpoint. He just is a big ball of stats, and you can make a lot of units into a big ball of stats.
Yep.
Whereas Ross, he can do water walking much earlier than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
He can do mountain rocking, which he only competes with Dazla for that.
Yeah.
I mean, in flyers, but
yeah.
He's a more beefy version, like more beefy than the Pegasus is. But he only competes with Dazla for mountain walking, and Dazla's kind of garbage.
Yeah, he also comes much later, and yeah.
And yeah, it's easier to train him than, because he joins so early, it's easier to train him than like Amelia or Ewan.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that you're in most cases, unless you have a specific plan for Ross, probably better funneling that experience into like Franz or Vanessa.
Yes.
But you can also fairly easily, like, Sacred Sons is not a game where you have to train only one unit in the early game.
That's true.
You can fairly easily train Franz, Vanessa, and Ross, and then just, you know, use whichever ones turn out well.
Mm-hmm. I think that's definitely true, and Ross is absolutely... Like, I agree with your points on Ross. I think Ross is a good unit. I like Ross a lot. The amount of times I've gone through Chapter 3 and just used Ross to kill everything on that chapter so he immediately promotes to Pirate is quite a lot. But my big issue with Ross is, like, and you touched on it a bit, it's the competition he has for that early experience. You've got Franz, you've got Vanessa, and then you also have Arta, who joins on Chapter 4, they're not just 3 good units, those are 3 of the best units in the game once you train them up. And I think they're going to hog a massive portion of that early experience. And then, past that, you've obviously got Seth, you've also got Garcia, who are just units who, they don't benefit as much from that experience, but they're just really good at the time. Like, stray kills, you're probably just throwing them onto Seth and Garcia just to get rid of them in the easiest fashion. Not that Ross is, like, incapable of killing things. It's a similar issue to what I think Loot has, in a sense, and, like, sure, they grow well, but I just never find them to be, like, a target of my investment over these other units, unless I specifically just want to use them for fun. But if you do invest into Ross, I think he's a perfectly solid unit. You know, I think there's a reason why he's so popular in draft formats. He's sort of got that label as sort of a second carry in the draft format, because there you aren't getting all of Vanessa, Ross, Arta, those early game units who really want EXP, so Ross can afford to take a lot of EXP, and as a result of that, he can become very, very competent. But when he's got to actually compete with those other units in a standard playthrough, I think, especially the fact that Vanessa and Franz have so much move, and then Arta kind of has his sort of, like, not necessarily niche role, because Vanessa can do it as well, but more limited role of being able to deal with mages, then it just hinders the opportunities Ross has to gain EXP, which is a bit of a shame, but I think that is kind of what holds him back the most. And again, in more draft-oriented formats, I think that's why he really thrives, because he just gets all that XP.
That is a really good point, and the Iron Man where he was, like, really good for me was a draft, so that's probably why I have a higher opinion of him than you do, because he was competing with Arthur and Vanessa, and then Vanessa died very early on, so he was competing for experience with, like, Seth and Arthur. Yeah, I think you've swayed me. I think I disagree, not because I don't think he's good if you invest in him, like, it's not an Amelia situation, and he does have a niche, and if you're doing, like, a specific challenge run where you need water walking and, like, Chapter 6 or whatever, that's good, but I agree with you, or disagree with the take and agree with you. You've swayed me.
Yeah, the take's a really weird one, because I think everything about this take is correct, apart from the part about Ross being underrated. Like, I agree, the first 9 trainee levels can go quickly, the hatchet fixes his accuracy problems, he ends up as a fast berserker that's great all the way until the end of the game. But I just think his big issue is his competition at that point in time is quite strong. And again, Franz and Vanessa having great movement doesn't help him at all, because they're so likely to just run in ahead of him and just kill things.
The
that being
hatchet
said,
also isn't a oh, sorry.
No, yeah, go on.
The hatchet also isn't a personal weapon. So, like, the hatchet fixes Garcia's accuracy problems, too.
So, I only learned that when I did Sacred Stone Super Hard a couple of months ago. Despite having...
Really?
FE8 was my first Fire Emblem. I started playing it when I was 9 years old in 2005. And in 2022, I learned the hatchet wasn't a personal weapon. Yeah, I always thought it was
like
Ross
it should be.
I thought it was like
It
Rolf's
feels like it
bow.
should be.
Like, yeah, it was
Yeah.
just his thing. No, anyone can use it. So yeah, you can give it to Garcia and he can start bonking away at things, and yeah, it's a bit of a shame because I do really like Ross, and like I say, I've done quite a few playthroughs where I literally just have him throw hatchets at things over the wall on Chapter 3 for pretty much to take out everything on that map, super slow play it, grind it out, and get Ross to immediately be a pirate, and it's a lot of fun. But if you were asking me, like, is this the optimal way to play Sacred Stones, I have to say no. Like, I think you can just... You can beat those chapters a lot more easily than you can by using Ross. If you do give him XP, he's great. If you're playing with Tower of Volney, Lagadu Ruins, Skirmishes, yeah, he has all the grinding time in the world. He will be a very good unit for you, but the same can be said of units like Amelia, Ewan. Yeah. I think Ross is probably fairly rated in a standard run with no auxiliary battle-esque things.
Yeah, and I think that's generally the best way to rate people. I know, like, you know, efficiency isn't necessarily the only way to rate people, but I do think no grinding separates people out, even if you're going for, you know, Iron Man instead of efficiency. Interesting that you say you really like Ross, and I do too, because we both agreed that child characters should not be fieldable soldiers.
True.
And yet Ross is definitely a child character. I think the GBA sprites, for me, make me forget that he's a child.
Yeah, he looks more like a teenage, like a 15-odd-year-old to me. I don't know how old he actually is, I've got no idea, but that's sort of the age I've always envisaged him as, like...
Oh, I don't know how old he is either, but from his official art, I kind of think of him as like 10 or 11.
Oh, maybe he is, I've got no idea, but yeah, I'm just going off of his sprite and sort of his general demeanor.
Leave a comment if you know Ross's age.
Yeah.
Because I actually am curious now.
Yeah, if you know Ross's age. We could look at the wiki, but that's about as reliable as, well, nothing, so...
And it doesn't bait engagement.
True, that is true. The word engage has still been ruined for me.
I'm sorry.
The Fire Emblem engagement. So, we have one take left, or one opinion left, and this one doesn't come from the community. This one comes from me. Now, it's not necessarily an opinion I hold, it's just one I want to pose to you, and it's related to something you said in your introduction. More variable game modes, such as randomizers and 0% growths, should be included in the series as standard.
Strongly agree. Oh my god. Don't get me wrong, it's enjoyable to, like, come up with challenge runs on your own. Like, that's part of what I enjoy about Zero Growths and other challenge runs is this is a way that the game is not intended to play. Let's do it anyway. I think playing games wrong is a term that I've heard thrown around a bunch. But some of the more standard ones, like randomizers, Iron Man as like an enforced option. I know XCOM does that.
Yep.
Like, and Zero Growths, and even stuff like reverse recruitment, which isn't a challenge run, but is like a game variation. Would be super nice to have.
Especially in something like Engage with the rings, like just even like reverse the ring order. And I know we got something there with fixed growths and randomized growths, but this should have been in the series a long time ago.
Yes.
No. With the popularity of 0% Iron Man's randomizers, things like that, something of this nature should have been in the series a long, long time ago. And we've even now lost New Game Plus, which was sort of an element to that. It's not something I ever really played around with, but I know a lot of people are very disappointed about that loss of New Game Plus. But yeah, we should have more, I think just more options in general when starting up a playthrough. Like, for anyone who's played Dark Deity, the difficulty is essentially completely customizable in that game, and it's very interesting. I like that sort of stuff. Just include these things especially now. I understand Nintendo won't be, or IS won't be taking this into consideration, but the games nowadays are much more awkward to modify than they used to be. Like, implementing a patch to add in a randomizer or 0% growth is not what it used to be in the GBA days.
Still a very robust hacking scene for both Engage and Three Houses. Unfortunately, the current... so I made a kind of bad version of 0% growths, but the current good version that allows Rise Above to function as intended only works on version 1.2.
Okay.
But, like, there's a ton of both cosmetic and gameplay related if you have the ability to modify your Switch or Nintendo PC, I highly recommend checking out Engage's Game Banana page, because there's stuff like reverse recruitment, reverse rings, a bunch of cosmetic stuff, zero growths. We don't have a randomizer yet, but there's a lot of really interesting alternate ways to play out there.
Yeah, there are, but I still think these should just be included in the game, at least to a larger 100%. Degree than they are, yeah. So I'm going to full on strongly agree on this one. So far, all of these takes I've posed myself I've ended up agreeing with, so maybe I need to stop framing them from a different perspective, so... Because I always say, like, it's not necessarily something I agree with, but so far they are. But, yeah, I think... There's pretty much no reason not to have them at this point, and I think that's my biggest issue. Like, it doesn't seem like it would be that difficult for them to implement. Your characters don't gain stats if you select this option. You can't use Divine Pulse if you select this option. Or just various different little difficulty modifiers to let people challenge themselves, I guess. There's obviously a recognition of the fact that, like, a lot of the Fire Emblem community play this game for something resembling a higher level of challenge, because they obviously patched in Maddening mode to 3 houses and things like that. They always make some adjustments between Maddening and other difficulties beyond just stat increases, like limiting Divine Pulses, or Dragon Time Crystals, whatever they're called, from normal mode in Engage, and various other things. But, yeah, just give us more options.
Even if they only, like, locked it behind, you have to have a cleared save file to do it. Like, they did that with Radiant Dawn and some of the recruitable characters. But if they did that for, like, alternate modes, I wouldn't have a huge problem with, like, hey, you have to play through vanilla before you get access to randomized mode or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair.
But yeah, I also strongly agree, in case it wasn't clear.
Yeah, so I think we both full and strongly agree on that one. It was a fairly agreeable episode. I don't think we were too far apart on too much.
Yeah, like you said, agree to agree as opposed to agree to disagree.
Agree to agree. Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, well, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to this. I am excited to see what people think about our takes, and what if there's anyone who disagrees with things we agreed with, or vice versa. I love hearing other people's opinions on Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
Because, like, everyone approaches the game and the series super differently. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the series and the community.
No, I definitely agree with that, and it is really interesting to see people's takes. I've enjoyed the discussion on these so far that sort of came from these takes, so it's quite nice to see. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on, and yeah, check out Dani's channel in the description, and catch you next time. So that wraps up this Agree to Disagree. Huge thanks once again to Dani for coming on the show, and make sure to check out their channel, which is linked in the description below, as well as the charity stream I mentioned at the beginning. I would also like to once again thank everybody who backs the channel on Patreon. The support is greatly appreciated, and again, a link is in the description below if anybody else wants to support. If you want to discuss this video, the channel, or Fire Emblem in general, consider joining the Discord. Thank you all very much for watching, and goodbye.